Good morning, thank you for seeing me, and I'll just start to introduce myself. I am Head of Communication and Public Affairs in what's called FDIH, which is the Danish Ecommerce Association. I'm actually not schooled in any way on e-commerce, so to speak. I'm a journalist, I'm a former banker, and I've even had a job as a lorry driver. So I've done a lot of different things throughout my career. But today I'm here to talk about e-commerce and online trends. I've been with the Danish Ecommerce Association for the past 7.5 years, and I also take part in some of the working committees in the European Association, which is called E-commerce Europe. I'm here today to talk about, shortly, on our little association, a lot about Danes and e-commerce, something about what happens because e-commerce, or you could say retail, is going borderless, which means that we actually trade on companies all over the world. And finally, I'll get into the trends that we see right now, which is very important for especially the retail, but also for the B2B businesses. Finally, I'll get into something which I'll this time has called the challenge, and I believe that some of you sitting here today may be the answer to the challenge. Well, I'll get back to that. And I'll try to make this within the hour which has been given to me, but feel free to ask during the presentation. Otherwise, we'll just make a recap at the end and we'll discuss the different things that I present to you. Danish Ecommerce Association, we're just close to our 20th anniversary. We were actually born for someone who actually believed back in the 1990s that it could be great to trade something on the internet, but the difficult part was always to figure out how to pay, and sending SMSs, short text messages with your credit card number didn't seem a very fine way to do it. So it ended up that the national debit card was finally, after a lot of political pressure, turned into something we could use on the internet, and it's still the dominant means of payment in Denmark. First payment, 10th of April, 1999. We're still very, very proud of this. Finally, we have ended up winning another case against those who have the Dankort, mainly the bankers, simply because it turned out to be expensive over the years. So they've been told to lower their prices. We are an association which only figure on digital commerce, so to speak, which means that we have a membership for any company who deals with digital commerce or deals with something on the internet. We're not something just for those who sell clothes or those who just sell groceries or anything like that. Anyone who's has some business with digital commerce are those that we want to enroll in our little association. We have about 1,000 members. They represent more than 2,000 online shops. And if we take up their annual turnover, they cover just about 60%, which is something like beyond 50 billion Danish kroner. In the association, the focus areas right now, that's policy, public affairs, that's me, and also communication, which is part about how to spread the knowledge about digital commerce. Finally, analysis. We have one major survey which covers about 15,000 Danish consumers each year. And finally, the service towards our members. But basically, we define ourselves as something that we are only what we are. We don't have a reason to exist unless we is driven by the needs of our members. So the basic is about communication. In Danish, we usually say, vi formidler, vi forbinder, vi fighter. In English, that would be communication, how to spread the facts, tell you about new condition, EU regulation, and things like that. and telling the facts to the rest of the society, the rest of our community about what is e-commerce, what are the businesses. Finally, we are also, you could say, a hub where the members can use one another, kind of networking. But if you have a problem, you're probably not the only company having this problem. You may have some colleagues somewhere in a different branch, but having the same problems. Why don't ask your colleagues, does anyone know things like about this? Does anyone know if this is a good program or what? And finally, we are the champion for our members. We're the one to fight in the EU, in the Danish Parliament towards regulation, and even if some of our suppliers, that could be the postal services or something like that, they have a problem with, you could say, being more upbeat than they are right now. But we tend to push anyone we can to make better possibilities for our members. FDIH e-handelsanalyse. It's been around for almost 8 years. It's a major survey. We ask those little less than 15,000 people each year, 1,200 each month, about how they conduct their e-commerce. We also do a lot of service surveys on our members, but this is the main thing, and it's actually more or less a standard today. You'll see it's quoted in a number of major reports. It also goes to show that the increase in e-commerce in Denmark has been very high during the years, and what we thought a year or two ago, like, okay, now we are on top, it might slow down a bit, it doesn't. We still, especially this is on the retail side, we have an average growth about 18% for the past few years. So the Danes, the consumers, actually use e-commerce, and they tend to use it more and more and more. This means if you take the Danish society as a whole, we have something like 850 billion Danish kroner to spend a year. The main part goes to pay for housing, transport, and things like that. But when we have done all that, last year we had 365 billions to spend on your private consumptions and the things like that. Out of those 365 billions, almost 86.9 billions was spent in e-commerce. This means that if you look at the retail sector, this is usually money that goes to the retail sector. Right now, it goes to the retail sector, but it goes through online commerce or e-commerce. Which means a quarter of any Danish krone we spend is spent online. And this means that the idea of, as I heard recently, unfortunately by someone who is the head of what we call Væksthus, which is one of the institutions which should actually help businesses. He said that, well, he thinks that e-commerce is here to stay. I believe it is. I believe he's not here to stay for much longer. Looking at Danes buying on the internet. Last year, almost 80% of Danes bought goods or services online. And what's more interesting, seen from a retail point of view, is that 8 out of 10 planned buys is usually started on the internet. Which means any buy, even if you want to go buy a bike or buy some new clothes in a special shop, you might check this online before you go out shopping. What's the price? Is it possible to get it in this shop that I want to go to? And this means that, as we say today, if you're not on the internet, you really don't exist in the eye of the consumer. Denmark is is a card country. We pay almost anything by card. But for the past year or two, we've seen a decline in card payments, which means that any kind of software-based solutions or cards turned into software on your mobile phone, so to speak, is the way that we see things are changing right now. Online purchase is not much of it. You could say, oh, I just want to buy this, and you go online and you buy it. This doesn't happen. So anytime you spend too much money going through a Netto, you actually only want to go to buy some milk or some Coke or anything like that, and you end up coming out spending like 70 kroner and wondering what actually happened here. This is not the thing that we see on the internet, not in that, to that extent at least. It's old-timers like me, about 50, who spend the most online. And then the family with children are actually the heavy buyers. They are the one who uses the internet the most. That is, for those, for the families with children, it's mainly because they use it to save money and to get the, sometimes even to get the exact goods that they need. Something like me, it's just that I spoil myself and I get a great possibility to actually search for the best wine, for the best clothing, for the best travels and things like that. When we started to buy on the internet, it was like, okay, I'll get the cheapest price, and Danes actually love this part about the price, but we've seen from here that right now it's convenience and the assortment. What can you actually get on the internet, which has turned out to be a bigger factor than just price when people choose to buy something online. And we've all seen last year that things change when people want to have their goods delivered. They don't want them at the home address. Only 49% does that. It's more like, I want to deliver it at my work, I want to deliver it at a shop, or anything that's more convenient to me. So we see a change in the behavior that we've seen over the past few years. So it's all about what's most convenient for the consumer, what do they actually want the most, and that what actually dictates how they buy and how they want to have things delivered. Mobile phones and tablets, we don't see them overtake the your PCs, not this year, perhaps not next, but they're growing rapidly right now. And finally, I'll just say that equality here is like men and women purchase at the same rate on the net. And what do we buy? This is very similar to what you'll see in most of Western Europe. It's mainly clothing and accessories. They stand. This is the number of buys. It's just about every fifth buy on the internet is about clothing in some way. And then comes film, music, books, games, toys, and then tickets for travels and for events like concerts and so like. The main thing is right now that the e-commerce on the retail side is driven especially by clothing. But also, as it is, if you want to go travel, if you want to buy a ticket somewhere, you usually don't go to a shop, you just do it online.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I think maybe that might come as a surprise to some that it is 50 years plus that are heavy users of internet when it comes to e-commerce. I think that most students, when they look at the projects and so on, and they have to define the target groups, they would say young people, that's the one buying on the internet, so that should be our target group. But actually, it's old-timers that might be the most interesting.
And you're absolutely right.
Have you seen change in that over
Yeah.
the last 8 years when you conducted this research?
The basic is, I'm sorry to say, put it this way, if you're on SU or anything like that, I probably make something that is at least five times your monthly income. This means that I have the money. The young people really don't have the money. What's interesting to us is looking at what do people between 20 and 25 buy, because they are the next consumers. You have this, it changes about the age of 25, where I go from being a low income group to the one who gets their first job starts to have something that they can use for consumption, really. So right now, we are the ones, you could say, that actually half the time we have been with the computers for the past 20 years. So it's not like I was just about 30 when I had my first PC, which has less power than perhaps even than this little thing. But I'm used to computers, but it don't come as natural to me as the younger people, which means that it's more like a mental bridge, and then there's the simple part about who has more money to buy for and who'll spend it on this. And for anyone being a student knows what it's like when there's no money at the end of the month. You don't start going on the internet to figure out what to buy next. No, you look more into, can I afford to buy another pizza, or how can I live on spaghetti for 3 days and things like that. So it's like we have different ways to act on this. So right now, we are the one using the money on the internet. And the funny thing is also the retired people above 65, actually spend not that much, but when they buy something on the internet, they spend a lot of money, especially on travel. And why do we actually buy on the internet? If you just ask for one reason, then it's still the price. But if you look at some of the other reasons, it's more like, I can only find these goods online, I save time, I can buy at times that suits me, and I can't buy the desired goods in my neighboring area. So it comes more to convenience right now, and it comes to the assortment about what can I actually get on the internet. So it's like, as we also speak on in retail business, we have fewer shops in smaller cities. So if you live just outside of Copenhagen, you don't have to go very far. You just figure out, oh, it's very difficult to find a specialized shop which has found a special niche, but you can find the shop on the internet. So it's more like, where can I get the things I want, and how do I access them? If we look at the money, and we take this figure shows that all in all, grocery, foods, beverages and takeaways account for 160 billion Danish kroner in 2015. Only 4% went to online. That's about 4.5 billion Danish kroner we spent on supermarkets and buying things through Just Eat. And even some of the beverages, Philips on wine and things like that. Which actually turns out that if you really want to count on this, if you look at sport and leisure equipment, it's almost half that goes online, which means it's close to 6 billion out of a total turnover in this area last year of 12 billion. So even though we don't buy that much groceries seen in the big picture, it's actually one of the things that is very important to e-commerce, and it's growing at an extremely high rate right now. So we believe that groceries will be the next big thing, and even just, let's say, 10 or 15% of the turnover in groceries, if they go to online, it'll be one of the biggest areas where we spend our money. I will say, most of the schemes that you see here I've sent our whole survey. They come from the survey, and I've sent the survey to Maria, so she'll be able to provide you with the PDF of the survey in whole. It's a 66 pages thing, a lot of figures, and also my presentation will be available as a PDF afterwards. And this is what you asked about earlier, that you can see that if we look into the middle-aged here, we may not be the one that buy the most. It's more like the singles and the families, but we are the one that really are the heavy users when it comes to paying. And down here, we believe that it looks like young people up to 25 really don't buy that much, but a great number of the things that you actually buy on the internet is things that you download, and you could ask yourself, do I actually consider this as some kind of e-commerce? Is it just something I do? I may pay through my App Store or Google Play or Netflix or whatever. I start saying something about mobile devices. Here when we say mobile devices, we also take in the tablets. But we see an increase. The mobile phone here covers like 13% of the last buys were searched by a mobile phone, which meant that you use your mobile phone to decide what to buy. And when you buy, you really don't use the mobile phone. It's kind of an exciting way to live if you will have to sit with your plastic card and your mobile phone and anything and try to figure out how to get the right numbers in. And this is the reason why we see that cards are turned into software, we see PayPal on the rise, and we see like things like mobile pay, and it's also used right now more for payments and even on the mobile. The thing about tablets is that they're not widely spread among the young people, but among families with children. This is the thing that's on the table. It's like something you can hand over to a kids. There's always an app that you can use and you can play with. But anytime you see a commercial on TV, it's like, Mommy, okay, hand me this. Dup, 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 dup. Oh, now I see what this was all about. And this means that a quarter of all buys conducted by families with children are done on a tablet. And that's one of the places that we see that it really goes down for the PCs. And where do we buy? We tend to look outside Denmark. Zalando, Germany based, eBay, partly American, but also European branch. Amazon, the same thing. So the three top stores that Danish consumers tend to go to are outside Denmark. And this leads me to what I started by saying, that e-commerce is borderless. It's only about 70% of all buys from e-commerce, from Danish e-commerce, that actually go into Danish e-commerce shops. And I'm afraid that I actually think it could be even less. But anyway, we tend to look outside Denmark. Looks like that we are very confident about buying in different countries. And one of those who actually goes up fast, so to speak, only at 2%, is China. We didn't have China on this scheme 2 years ago. But this just goes to show that this is a global thing seen from Danish point of view. And it is actually a great problem, especially to retail branch, because e-commerce is also a part of normal retail as you know it from brick and mortar shops. So right now, we're actually seeing that the Danish retail is missing something like close to 31% of the possible buys, which is just about those 29 27 billion kroners. So if the retail branch goes like, oh, people buy not enough to us to keep the shop going or to keep the employment high, they might be right. The money is somewhere, but it's not in Denmark. So last year, out of the total spending on e-commerce in Denmark, it was just like 26.9 billion Danish kroner went outside Denmark. And when we ask people about this is also about price, but it's like it's only available outside Denmark. And if you take your future and say, I want to work with e-commerce, you could ask yourself, how come that a shop outside Denmark is able to sell something that I'm not able to sell in Denmark? This could be one of the things that where you could say, how do we handle this? How do we get the customers to come back to the Danish shops? Of course, they save money. But the thing that really is special to those of us who are really into this is I really didn't consider the nationality of the web shop, which means that people really don't care. It's on the net. It's like if you're talking to someone on Facebook, LinkedIn, looking at pictures from Tumblr or whatever you use, Instagram, it's not that you start to decide, is this worth looking at because the one who uploaded this stuff is from another country? No, you just look at the stuff and say, is this interesting? Well, then it's interesting enough for me to read. I don't care where the person come from. It's the same about shops. And finally, this small one down here saying that I'm a regular customer in this web shop. Well, some of us actually use Amazon or use Zalando or use Thomann if we're playing guitar, something like that. So there are reasons why we do this as a consumer, but seen from a Danish business point of view, especially the retail business, this is not very nice to read, but you could say there should be room for improvement. Some of you have heard about DESI, which means the Digital Economy and Society Index. It's made by the EU and goes to show where the different countries within the EU are placed, like which are the one who's best on the internet, on digital area. And Denmark is actually number 1, but only if you count everything together. And it's like we've got a lot of broadband, anyone has access to the internet, anything goes. But if you look into this, which means individuals ordering goods or services online from sellers from other EU countries, it may not be surprising that we are here. It's not surprising that this is Luxembourg, 300,000 people in the middle of Europe, and with all the different countries around, so they'll use this. Austria, they buy a lot in Germany. But anyone in Danish e-commerce really wants to start selling to Germany. A lot of money, a lot of Germans, highly educated. The funny thing is that the Germans really don't need us. They're here. So this means that the German consumer really only needs to go to German sites. So if you want to sell something in Germany, you'll have to disguise yourself as a German. Otherwise, don't expect to sell anything unless you got an exceptional good brand. So our main issue for the past 2 years has been that anyone get moving, start selling outside of Denmark. We have a close relationship with the foreign ministry. We have a close relationship with anyone who's able to help us. So only if you just take the area closest to Denmark, we've got 300 million EU citizens who are able to go online. It may only be 60 million of those who actually buy in other countries, referring to the scheme earlier. But on the other hand, 16 million, that's close to 20 times the number in Denmark. We have about 3 to 3.5 million Danes who actually shop online. But the basic is that we'll just have to tell our members that they should meet the customers on their terms. which means that if you want to go to Germany, you'll have to speak the language. You'll have to know how they trade, what they prefer. And it's the same if you go to Sweden. Don't expect them to pay with card. If you go to Germany, only expect them that you send them an invoice. Very seldom you see card payments in Germany. And especially use the Export Council, the Foreign Ministry, PostNord. Despite the postal services, someone could look a bit oldish. They're actually very good, especially on China right now. And then there's the thing about if you're going to a company and you want to start selling online, it's extremely important that everyone supports this. Everybody understands that this is not something that's done in a part of the company. It's something that will affect everyone. So it's all in if you do it. And if you don't do it right the first time, try another. The trends we see among the consumers right now and what actually works is especially about video. If you want to sell something, it's not enough just to talk about it. It's like don't tell, show. And this goes that they actually want the good story and something that's perhaps even funny or something that really, you could say, not mind-breaking, but at least something that's interesting to us because you want to share these things. Content management is usually based on something like, oh, this is the way you write your text on describing the products and how you want to sell to people. I'm still sad anytime I go into something where it's where I get lost on a site. I accept that for Danish tax authorities. I don't think I ever met anyone who's able to navigate on that side. It's even not possible to understand what they write. But to see that on a commercial side, that's a pure catastrophe, especially for the one who owns the site. So, basically, you'll have to look into your site. How is the search engine? Does it actually come up with something people can use? Most really don't write the right words, and there's no right word. There's only what your customer is looking for. Remember this. This is extremely important. I've seen some horrible examples, even among our own members, where we have to discuss and say, well, this guy wants to buy a freaking frying pan. Okay, but he just wants to buy one thing, and that's a Theil. So we write Theil. You sell Theil, you don't have it in your search engine. How do you think anyone is going to find what you actually expect them to do? And this goes to be even more important the minute that you start to look at the next point, that is the mobile. If you don't convert your search engine, your site, to something which is usable on a mobile phone, and we saw earlier that there's a great rise in search by mobile phones when you want to buy. If you don't adapt your search engines to this, imagine trying to figure out on Amazon that you want to buy something. I don't remember the number of products, but it's beyond my imagination. But if it don't narrow things down to where you actually want to find something, it's completely impossible. Anyway, as one of the major gurus on user experience, is Danish, called Jacob Nielsen, once said, in best of times, you got 70 seconds before your customer leaves your site. In best of times, and this is by the time where we usually all use the PC or any kind of computer, but not using your phone. So it narrows down. You've got very few seconds to connect with your customer and make things happen. Mobile responsive design, at least perhaps an even specialized design, works better. Remember to put some GPS tracking on, at least for yourself. You have to gather information from what they do. Remember the photo and the video, they should work on the mobile as well. And most of all, if you want to have your customers use a mobile, remember to have these easy payments. And finally, service, just top class. Don't piss off your customers. You'll get to know a shitstorm when it hits you, but then it's too late. So trends seen from point of view of retail sector as a whole, omnichannel is the reality right now. We start our search by any buys, 8 and 10 buys. The customers, they expect the full service. There may be two different kinds of legislation of how you protect the customers, whether they buy online or they buy offline, but it really doesn't matter to the customers. It's like if you look at Elgiganten, if you look at Whoopty and things like that, they simply set up a set of rules, and Bilka as well. It's like we set our own set of rules, it's much better, and the customer is always right. So you say the click and collect, what is that? Is that online? Is it offline? You want them to set a flat screen aside for you. Have you bought it? Have you not? You ordered it, but you didn't pay for it. You go down, you look at it, and then you take it out through the cashiers. Then it's strange enough, is that an online sale where you have the possibility to return and regret and return? Or is it a physical buy? Legal stuff, not very interesting as such, but it just goes to show that things right now merge very much from the online and the offline world. Mobile devices, no doubt everyone has one, perhaps even two. And it's simply one of those things. You'll have to be able to handle this if you want to sell something to people. Otherwise, you're not connected to them. Payment goes mobile. I've said it a number of times. We see that software solutions are gaining ground right now. It's moving at amazing speed. And we will see new kinds of payments within the next year too. And then there's one thing which political also is an issue, that's the security and the data theft. So the data handling is one of the major issues that you'll have to look into anytime you work with a business model. Are you allowed to gather these data? What do you use them for? Do you have consent from those who actually owns them, from your consumers? There are a lot of questions that will have to be asked. And if you just look at the latest directive from the EU coming up, is that data handling, if you don't comply with the directive and the regulations, it could cost you up to 2% of your annual turnover. This could be very, very hard on some of the smaller ones. And then we have something which is a really challenge. It's about to be here, the sharing economy. What happens if do-it-yourself people finally realizes that every time they buy a power tool like a drill, it's only used for like what it could be used for, like in best of cases, a tenth of what it could be used for during the whole time they have it. So why don't three neighbors say we just buy one power tool? It's not very likely that we should use it all at the same time, and we might find some solution. So this means that if the sharing economy really, really goes Airbnb and Uber and things like that, people, they are more, you could say that we have a better use of whatever we produce, but to those who sell it, it's very, very bad. Finally, the challenge, all of these changes coming up, all of this, what we already see now, the great challenge is actually, do we have the skills to handle all these questions? And the short answer right now, that's a no. We've been through a number of our members, both the big ones and the small ones. And it turns out that the people they get from the schools, from places like Cphbusiness, it's, some of you may want too much to be paid, to a high salary. I acknowledge that. Of course you want to get paid well, but damn thing is there may be some guy in Ukraine who'll go for half the payment. And if you just talk about, let's say, the basic part about IT, setting up a new website and things like that, he might do this as well. And if you tell, okay, you come to Copenhagen, find you some place to stay, you still get a pay, you think it's all right, and suddenly you have something like one of the Danish companies called Autobottler, who actually provide services for car owners who wants the best price on repairs. They've had to set up an office in Berlin simply to get the right people at the right price to do the job. And whether they do it in Berlin or they do it in Jensgade in Copenhagen really doesn't matter. So the question is, do we have enough or do we have the skills that we need? And in this place, going back to the DESI report, it turns out that the gap between what Danish business needs and the number of people coming out with the right educations, that gap is widening right now. This is what we actually see as the biggest threat. Danish consumers may buy something in Germany and any place else. But the big problem is actually, if we don't have the skills to meet the consumers' needs and expectations, then we have the real problem. So, to us, it's not like the politicians usually say, that digitization of businesses and the Danish society is more like a question of rolling out more broadband. Well, they may have broadband on like almost to the shore in Western Jutland. That's all right. But if there's no people to use all of this broadband, we really have a problem. So it's simply, to us, better training, and then create some kind of a new mindset that thrives on changes. It is like that. If you go into a business and say, okay, now we'll have to go online. What happens now? What happens? Let's just take the logistics. The old guy at the storage, he really knows where everything is. Look at him and say, oh, do you remember we had that, we sold that 2 years ago? Oh yeah, it's over there. But if you put this into a computer, it's not like, I believe it's in that area of the storage. No, it's like, it's there. Not here, not there, but there. Computer is kind of smart, but it's also kind of dumb. You'll have to be extremely precise. And this is what happens when you digitize a business, is that anything goes into a system which requires exact specifications, exact facts, and this means that the whole organization goes to be very transparent, but could also be very efficient. But as I said earlier, you have to go all in, you have to change everything, because your consumer trying to buy something on the website are not satisfied when the question comes, when the answer comes out saying, oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't in stock anyway. Well, why is it on the website? If it's on the website, it's in the stock. But this is not the reality right now. So what you need is to train yourself, as Maria already said. It's about being innovative. It's about being able to think in new ways, but also being able to understand that digitization of a business is not just some kind of technology question. It's more like a new mindset, a new way of thinking, a new way of handling the issues that comes up. We don't believe that we just need one big, like a uniform education that covers everything. It won't. But what we need is that we start, like Copenhagen Business here, like coming up with new ideas. We see that all over the country. It's more like that if some 15-year-old come up to me and say, I want to do something in e-commerce, what kind of education should I get into? I'll look at him and say, I really don't know. You could go to CBS in Copenhagen, you could start somewhere else, you could start here. But I really can't tell you exactly what it is because we don't have that education. But what I believe is that with the speed of change that we see right now, it's much more important that you'll have to look at the young one and say, you'll have to get to know something about what you really want. Have some basics about the business that you want to be in. But the part that requires that you act like an Uber and Airbnb, things like that, would require that you actually look at the mindset, look at how do I change the existing businesses to act in a new digitized world. So thanks for listening. Any questions, please feel free.
I have one to start with.
Yeah.
We talk about disruption.
Yes.
And you mentioned a few examples like Uber and books, travel, music, banking, and so on. What are the next sectors that would be disrupted, do you think?
I wish I knew. I'll place my money there. I really don't have a simple question to that, but it's like that. You said this about banking and finance. It's still based on the old banks, and at least I don't know something about is that. Let's take a very specific example from Denmark. That Nykredit mortgage loans, Danish housing, put up the prices heavily, and everyone said, "I don't want to be here anymore." And suddenly, you see someone discussing, is it possible to move my mortgage to someone else? This is very huge amounts, billions of Danish kroner, so it's not something that's done overnight. But it opens a possibility for what you could call crowdfunding. Why don't people go together? It's about also the lending economy. So what we see right now is a change in behavior, and that's why I started by saying that you'll have to look into the younger people. If they are the one who's more into crowdfunding, who's more into lending economy, sharing economy, then this could, you could say, it could touch anyone. We don't have any specific sector saying this is just about to go down. It's not like we still have taxis. We also have Uber, but it's like most disruption. It's a starting point, taking out a market share, and afterwards, funny although, those who've been complaining the most are the ones who finally realize now I have to adapt or die. And if they don't die, they'll adapt, and they might even come up with something which is pretty smart because they still know something about the basics of this, about, you could say, transport people from one place to another. So it's like there's a business there. You just may change the rules. And about this crowdfunding, it's one of those things that you keep wondering, if you want something to pay your fine at a court, like we just had it recent, and we start a crowdfunding, say, oh, it's too bad for you. We come up with like 100,000 of Danish kroner. Now we've got someone else who's having a trouble. That's the tax authorities. They're looking at this, oh, a lot of people just gave him something. Is that a gift beyond taxation, or the amount so big that it's actually to be taxed? So the thing about disruption, and I believe if you get to read Børsen Online from yesterday, I had one who wrote about it's been used and it's actually been misused right now. It's not like something new technology changes everything. It's more like this, that this is about entrepreneurship and it's about innovation. It's about someone says, okay, this is the way we used to do it. What's the possible ways to do it in a different way? What are the basic needs in this? Do we have to do it the old way? So it's like, traditionally, if I want money, I go to a bank or a mortgage institute. What if I go on Facebook and say, I need some money? Who wants to support me? What's that? Is that a new bank? So the part about financing, and especially financing startups and entrepreneurs, that's one of the places where you could say, we can't use the banks for anything, but we can use each other to a lot of things.
Actually, I have one more.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Danish retail, they're actually losing about 9 to 10 billion Danish kroner to companies outside selling to Danish consumers, right? Since
yes,
31%
yes, that's right.
Of
if you look at Zalando, okay, they sell Echo shoes, so is it that bad? No, it's great because Echo is able to sell their shoes, though through a different retailer outside Denmark. And you can see from a great Danish point of view, a national economy, okay, that's all right, we export something. We might even buy it back. But the thing is that if you go into that, you say, well, that's all right, but it only helps Echo. It doesn't help the shoe dealers in the rest of Denmark.
So is that part of the global trend is that we need to sort of live with, or is it because Danish retail, they are lagging behind the rest of the world?
No, I believe there will be. The trend that you see right now is that the big companies are the ones who's actually having a feast on this. Despite EU's efforts to enhance the e-commerce cross borders, the number of rules, the number of directives are only met by the biggest companies. So it's like what we can see is that the smaller Danish companies actually lose on the number of directives. So it'll be the big companies who actually win. So it's like we'll have a Zalando, we'll have those, as I said earlier, buying musical instruments. They'll use Thomann also in Germany. Clothing, that would be ASOS as well. And there'll be a number of very big firms who actually act cross-border in every country in the EU. And we'll see the same in from shops outside the EU. So the thing is that right now, those who have the biggest potential of making the best business is like one of the shops in Denmark called Cphbusiness, which won our great prize last year. But he's actually able to corner the market in Europe and is trying also in the US on skater equipment. Skating equipment, who should thought of that? But he's a former skater, the founder and the owner. And he have all the right connections, so he still knows what goes on, uses Facebook to get inspired, uses Instagram, like what are the pictures coming up, what do people actually talk about? It's not me who should invent the next interesting thing. It's actually going on the streets. What do they talk about? What do they talk about on social medias? So you could always find somewhere where you can have a business, even a big business. I don't say that there's no general rule saying that big Danish companies can't compete on the global market, but it's just more difficult. And as we usually say, okay, Amazon had a bad year, and in one quarter they said, well, we lost 2.5 billion Danish kroner. Too bad, just a loss. Not many Danish companies are able to do that. So the competition is fierce all over, especially in the retail. Yes?
Concerning e-commerce, do you have already fixed law how to do the fair competition in e-commerce and
We don't have a specific legislation on what fair commerce is in e-commerce. It's more like what are the basic rules on fair competition. They apply for e-commerce as well. So you're not allowed to use your stronghold or strong position to tell what others what the pricing should be and what the delivery terms and prices should be and things like that. You're not allowed to do that, but it's under general legislation on competition, not especially on e-commerce.
So to make the business, for example, if you want to make the e-commerce business, then on what rules?
Well, yes. If you want to sell to consumers, there's a specific set of rules in Europe telling you what you're allowed to do and what you should offer your customers, and this is specific for e-commerce. And one of the major things is that any buy you make on the internet is like you could say, well, I regret and I return within 2 weeks. And that's basic. You can't avoid this unless people, you say, have something tailor-made. But on the other hand, anything you have on your website that you sell and it's bought by someone, you should give them 2 weeks to decide whether they want to keep it or they will return it. Okay. Yes.
As far as I could see, you didn't have the financial sector in the survey.
Yes.
And you were also mentioning something about crowd-lending, crowd investing starting now, and you go further to consumers. Do you have any plan on including the financial sector in future surveys?
No, it's more like a practical question from the survey point of view. How do you actually put up saying, when was the last insurance you took out? Did you do it online? What does it cover? What's the value of the insurance? How about taking out a loan, one of those, you can do instant loans and things like that. We really don't get some of the numbers, figures that covers
the
it.
problem, a big problem. And I was to another seminar 2-3 months ago, and their general opinion was that the waste sector that would be destroyed is the insurance sector,
Yes.
where you go in and create a hell of new products online.
Yes. I agree. That's one of the sectors where it's obvious that you should do, and especially on insurance, as this is heavily regulated, which means that a number of the insurance that you take out as a normal consumer concerning your house, your car and things like that, those are standards. And the minute that you got a standard, then you're able to sell it online, simply. But it's still like there's not very much fixed price in the finance sector. It's always like, oh, if you do this, you get a low interest over here, or a cut off the fees here and things like that. So it's a bit difficult, and it's not one of those that they use the digital possibilities a lot, but mainly to their existing customers. It's not used as a mean of something where they really gain new customers. We've seen a few, especially in the insurance, like Alka and things like that, who try to harmonize things and then sell it online at a cheaper price. Yes. Yes?
You mentioned in the beginning that e-commerce were essential on business to business. Does the business to business trade follow other patterns than the business to consumer?
No, the business to business used to be very much on their own terms. They're not very regulated in any way. But the trend right now in business to business is that you say that the guy at the screen is the same, even if he's a retail consumer or if he's on business to business. So we see that a number of even very big firms tend to change their interface towards towards the customers, and also internally to something which actually looks a lot like the technical side that we see on retail commerce. And the best example I can give is the Danish company Brødrene Dahl. They sell different things to plumbers and electricians and things like that. And they say, well, if you look at a typical plumber in Denmark, it's usually a fairly small company, less than 10 employees, which means that the guy who'll have to order new things, he'll probably do it the same way if he should order anything on the internet. So why don't give him the same service it's possible to do on the web? Usually we use what's called EDI to exchange orders. But right now it's like that. If you're a plumber, if you go through Brødrene Dahl, you will be able to get an app which could go on your mobile phone, so you can be at your customer doing something, figure out that I need some kind of tube or whatever, and then I'll just take out my mobile, go into the app and say, okay, I need this thing, should be in my account, and I want to pick it on the way back home. So I don't have to call someone, talk to people and things like that. They do the same in farming. One of the great suppliers of seeds and whatever you use in farming has the same thing. It means that the interface of the user, the one that goes for the users, it looks like the web, it looks like retail, and it's used that way in business. Brødrene Dahl turned out to have a system which is completely compliant with anything you need as a small contractor. And that meant that the head of the Danish IT and technology part in Brødrene Dahl, he's now the head of Saint-Gobain at the same thing, because he knows what it's all about. So he's changing all their different branches all over Europe now. So there is a trend. We're not very much spoken of, but it goes like, if you buy something B2B, it looks a lot like when you go to Coop and want to buy anything on Coop's website.